Thanks everyone for joining us for another great video meetup. Today's sponsored by Hewlett Packard Enterprise and Mobius Partners. We got a great show for y'all today. We're going to be talking about what storage refresh process looks like in the year 2021, both because of what's going on in businesses and in the world, as well as what's going on in developments in technology. For more on this, we have a great panel of experts for y'all today, including experts from Hewlett Packard Enterprise as well as from Mobius Partners. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start things off with a round of introductions so you guys can meet our panel of experts. Coming to us first, from Hewlett Packard Enterprise, everyone please welcome Mr. George Thornton to the show. George, welcome. How's it going today? Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
For sure. George, do you mind telling us a little bit more about yourself and what you do for HPE?
Sure, yeah, no problem. Been in the business for running on 25 years. I've held multiple positions in IT around, from CIO to IT admin to storage and server admins back in the day. I started my career on the network side back in the old Cisco CCNP days, and now with Hewlett Packard, I run the South Central US for our DSAs, our storage architects, and our server architects. So I run about 7 states, and just looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome, very cool. Notice the Star Wars poster in the background.
Absolutely, big Star Wars fan.
Very cool.
Oh yeah,
very cool.
Oh yeah. Mandalorian all the way. This is the way.
This is the way. This is the way. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, George. We're excited to hear from you. Let's introduce next your partner in crime, coming to us from Mobius Partners, Mr. Sean Franzen. Sean, welcome. Thanks again for joining as well.
Hello. Thank you.
Great. Sean, same question to you. Do you mind telling us a little about yourself and what you do for Mobius Partners?
Sure. My background goes back a ways too. I started. My first position was at Computerland, one of the original resellers, and then I kind of worked my way through some manufacturers. Worked for Compaq 3 times, HP, Apple, a variety of different manufacturers, and then made it all the way back to a reseller at the end here. I've been with Mobius now for almost 14 years, and I'm a solution architect in the Houston area, doing a lot of working with a lot of large enterprise customers in the data center.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us as well, Sean. Before we go any further, a couple things I did want to cover. If you do have questions for our panel today, please make sure to get them into our Q&A widget down below. We'll be taking them later on in the show. We've also got some great resources from Mobius and HPE to help supplement today's discussion, so please make sure to get those a look. I wanted to give a special shout out to our audience chat. See a lot of our favorite folks, including Trent the Gent, as well as he who shall now be named, Mr. Lord Voldemort himself, has decided to bless us with his presence. Of course, if you do decide to participate in chat, we do ask that you adhere to our community guidelines because we want to make sure everyone is having a positive and professional time in today's event. And as a special thank you for hanging out with us today, one of y'all is going to be walking away with the PowerBeats high performance wireless earbuds. These are actually really good headphones. I have a pair myself. I know there's a lot of hate about Beats by Dre, but these ones are actually really good. They connect very easily, especially if you have an iPhone, and they're perfect for running or just otherwise just walking around the house taking calls or whatever. So good luck to all y'all. Please make sure to get those questions in, and we'll be announcing the winner of the prize at the end of the show. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started into it. So, George, I'd like to start off with you. So, storage refreshes, it feels like a lot of IT pros have been through this at some point, or another, especially if you've been in the industry for quite some time. And yet it seems like the process is less cut and dried now, especially if you're comparing it to the ways that you've done it in the past. So can you talk to us about some of the main reasons that traditional storage refresh approach has become more of a hybrid discussion more than anything else?
Sure, absolutely. It's a big topic, right? And from what we've seen in the industry, cloud is absolutely here, right? It's a reality in our lives, and it absolutely makes sense for quite a few workloads, right? That customers target, right, in many different verticals. However, what we've seen as kind of a drawback to this is in the beginning, when cloud first became popular, there was quite a few customers that jumped in with both feet, right, and said, hey, we're going 100% cloud. We're going to put every app we can up there. And they quickly realized that they were going to have to take a more targeted approach, a more strategic approach around what apps go where. And so when we talk about this hybrid approach, we're truly talking about, I would say roughly today, it's easy to put about 30 to 40% of your applications in the cloud with no problems, right? I mean, performance is not really an issue. It's really about, mobility. It's really about versatility. It's really about standing up things quickly, right? Test and dev is a big one. Being able to stand up, server workloads or additional storage on the fly, swipe a credit card, that type of thing, and get those resources quickly deployed, is kind of why the cloud was invented. However, what we've seen after the bubble, right, of cloud hit, and then we take this step back and go, well, wait a minute, what about heavily transactional databases? What about very transactional, unstructured data workloads that need very low latencies and a lot of back and forth between the data centers and systems that are servicing them. And so what we've seen companies start to do is just take this very, very targeted approach of, hey, if I've got a highly transactional workload that requires very, very low latency, that has to stay on-prem. But that doesn't change the fact that I still want it to be cloud-like in my experience of servicing it. And so I still want to swipe that credit card. I still want to be able to stand up something in less than a couple days to a week to a month, right? That was the problem with a lot of traditional IT, is when we rolled things out, it would take a lot of communication back and forth between departments. It would take weeks, maybe even months, right, to get those services online. And in this day and age, that's just not acceptable. And so, Hewlett Packard has an interesting approach of a hybrid where we know that 40% of workloads go to the cloud, and we can service those and we can manage those via, multiple data center portals that we're coming out with. However, there is this need and demand for on-prem services. And how do we facilitate that, right? We'll talk about Greenlake a little later in the conversation, I think. And that's one way that we approach this, but there's absolutely a need to have workloads be on-prem, keeping in mind that we still need that cloud-like approach. I need to be able to stand those workloads up quickly. I need to be able to change them quickly. I need to be able to adjust, to be flexible. And that's why I think the hybrid approach is going to be the approach, right, for IT going forward in the next 5-10 years.
And Sean, what are your thoughts? Based out of the customers that you talk to, are you seeing an acceleration in the number of customers that are looking at hybrid, especially as opposed to on-premises deployments or even 100% cloud deployments as well?
Well, there's definitely an acceleration, especially if you consider some of the things with the pandemic and the cloud being something that you could do without necessarily even having to be there. But, the whole idea of, I think George had it right with, that there wasn't there's been a lot of momentum. I mean, if you're in this industry, it's all about hype. It's all about what's next, the next cool thing. And, there's a lot of momentum around cloud. I mean, I think the last thing was as big as cloud, and it wasn't even as big as cloud, was virtualization. Everything was virtualized this, virtualized that. And of course, over the time, virtualization did really kind of live up to the hype. I would say it's very pervasive today. But like from a cloud perspective, I think we're still pretty early on in the infancy, and there's just a lot of challenges to making workloads work in the cloud effectively. I mean, cloud, for one thing, it's not ubiquitous. It's not everywhere. You can't get it anywhere you want. As far as there's locations that don't have, it's a varying bandwidth, latency, performance issues like George mentioned. I think another thing about it is there's this, there's kind of a magic, I guess it's the magic of marketing, that everything in cloud is, it's just this, it's just going to work. There's no, they can support anything, and that's not the case. I mean, if you talk to anyone that works for any of the cloud providers, you get into the real details, and they're actually having the same challenges you would in any enterprise that was deploying all this equipment, right? There's just because you're saying you're cloud doesn't mean that you still have to rack systems. You still have to integrate the applications. All that stuff doesn't go away. It's just that you're not doing it. So I kind of feel like, if I look at the history, and I mean, in our business, you can look a lot at the past and determine about the future. Not exactly, but there's a lot of repeat. We do a lot of things over again when we have better technology and things. And I think we're kind of there with cloud right now. I mean, everybody is developing, all the major cloud providers, they're developing an ecosystem that makes it really attractive for you to stay there. Of course, and you don't blame them for that, right? But the issue with it is that if you go into an ecosystem like that, like George was talking about, if you go all in and you put all your eggs in one basket, good luck with getting out later, because it's not going to be, you're going to be dependent on the ecosystem. By that I mean, they're putting together a catalog of services that all integrate together, which is, it's valuable to you as a developer or as a person that wants to go in there and leverage the most you can. But when you do that, you're also getting into a situation where that makes your workloads pretty much unportable. In other words, you're not going to be able to switch later to another cloud. Let's say you go from AWS to Azure without a lot of work. And maybe it might even be, depending on how much you put in there, it may be impossible to do. So I think that there's a ways we have to go to get to, I'm hoping that we have a customer demand like we did. If you look at the hardware world, where we were doing mainframes at one point in time and everybody had like a proprietary vertical stack, and it was the same kind of thing. You were locked in, but ultimately customer demand, pushed it towards an open standards where we weren't locked in. We had options, and then of course that's better for the customer. I think right now it's really kind of moving more tides better for getting you hooked into an infrastructure that or an ecosystem that you're not able to get out of. And there's value there for sure, but you got to be very selective about it. And I think a hybrid approach is appropriate, like George said, to not go crazy with it, but to be very selective and do your due diligence to make sure you're putting the right workloads in there that make sense for you.
So, George, let's go back to you. We've kind of talked about a lot of different moving parts here. I mean, do you get the sense that a lot of the change in the way that hybrid is being adopted, what's the bigger driver? Is it all of the ways that the world is changing, that businesses are adapting to it? Or are we seeing kind of a really rapid evolution in the technology that's making hybrid easier to adopt to?
Sure, yeah. I think it's both, right? I think the world is absolutely changing. The last year and a half to 2 years has really been kind of an eye-opener, right, in how the world operates, or how the world can operate, or how the world maybe has to operate. And so, the ability to be flexible, to be mobile, the ability to service, maybe 90% of your business outcomes from a remote location or from, remote workers is absolutely a reality in this day and age. And, we have the hopes that we'll open up soon, but there's this variant out there, and it may close us down again. And so businesses are constantly having to, consider, if they're going to, what if they need to be remote for the next 2 years? What if they need to service workloads remotely in that time frame? And so, I think that the world is moving towards, we have to be able to do more with less, right? We have to be able to be flexible with the workloads that we stand up. We have to be quick when we do it. And then from just a profitability standpoint, right, the world is becoming, from a competition standpoint, it's not getting less, it's getting more. And so, to execute quickly, that's what cloud was built on, right? To stand up, compute workloads, storage workloads quickly, that's what cloud was built for. And so, I'm not saying by any means that cloud is not the answer. I believe it is. But I do believe it's this hybrid cloud approach where you're going to have on-prem clouds, right? And you're going to have clouds that are in what we think of as traditional cloud. And so from that perspective, I do believe it's business pushing IT towards this, faster response times, better outcomes, right? We want to be, IT needs to be less of a cost center and more of a cost benefit to the company, right? A profit-making machine, if you will. And then, of course, technology is becoming from a latency perspective. Let's just talk about 5G, for instance. Let's talk about WAN connectivity and availability of that cross country. I think that is becoming more prevalent, right? More readily available. And of course, as those latency times come down, cloud becomes more of a viable option for more workloads. So right now we say 30, 40%, but I could see in the next couple of years that being 50, 60%, right? So on and so forth. And so as the infrastructure grows and technology gets pushed and companies require more, right, profit, then, I think cloud is just a natural evolution of where we go. And so the ability for companies, though, to have an answer for both types, though, I think is very, very important. I think this is where a lot of companies miss. Having, even if we get to the point where it's an 80-20 split, right, 80% of my workloads can be in a traditional cloud market and 20% still have to be on-prem just because of that low latency response. I mean, I've got some customers that require 200 microseconds of latency. I mean, we're not going to see that on WAN connections for quite some time. And so from that perspective, if you don't have this hybrid approach going into this, I think it's a big miss.
And Sean, anything that you would add to that? Do you see it's the business being the bigger driver, or is it the technology really contributing to the growth that you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. I think it is both. I mean, definitely, we've gotten to a better place with technology. We do have better connectivity than ever before. Even though, like I said before, it isn't everywhere. We don't have the right latency. We don't have the bandwidth in some areas. But I mean, cloud to me is like it's a word like we like to do in our business. That is something that we've been doing kind of for a while. I mean, if I think about Microsoft and their growth in the cloud space, right, from a traditional software provider to like one of the biggest cloud providers that my customers work with, I'm thinking, well, like, what's their biggest, what's the biggest thing they're offering in the cloud? And I mean, I don't know for a fact. I haven't done but I have a pretty good feeling that Office 365 would probably be their number one revenue and biggest application in the cloud. And I don't know what you do with Office 365, but in my company, we use Exchange. And then the rest of the applications, we are, as part of the Office 365 subscription, we're allowed to download them and run them just like we always did. So for the most part, it's email in the cloud, which to me, we've been doing that for many, many years. That's not new, but it's kind of like, we're repositioning it and saying it's cloud. And I, my kids they're like using a lot of the apps that are cloud-based, like in school, the Google apps, and they're familiar with that. And I think we are getting a generation that's more comfortable, looking at the cloud alternatives to traditional apps. But this kind of reminds me, like I said, if you look at history, we see these things happening over and over again. And one of the things we saw with apps was, moving all apps to like HTML, like from traditional interfaces. When I say that, most people were using desktop systems, they had frameworks for developing applications, and those applications were consistent across those devices, and you were really comfortable with them. And then it was like, okay, there's this movement towards everything being, webified or whatever. And all these applications that used to work great, now they kind of have this kind of hacky HTML interface. It went from like, that it takes a long time to take that application that was working good to completely make it work in a different manner. And that's that's what's going on. Another thing that's going on in cloud is we can talk about simpler things like, leveraging email capacity in the cloud, or leveraging storage, which is pretty well understood, and we know our limitations and what we can and can't do. But other things are much less sure. We're much less sure of. Like, obviously, containers is very big today. We hear a lot about it, and containers means like a lot of. I mean, you can containerize something that really wasn't designed to be containerized, but that's not really what the goal is. The goal is for apps to be redesigned in a way that they can leverage it in the best way. And the traditional, that's one thing that would push you to go to a cloud, because most companies, their IT departments, if they have them, the larger ones, which they do, they're not really developer resources. They're more like admin resources. It's a different world in the cloud than the traditional IT world, where we were really just putting the pieces together from stuff that's already built, and not having to like do a lot of scripting and coding. And just look at any kind of description for any of these jobs that are out there it reads like you're a developer. I mean, it's a different world. And in that respect, if you want to do some of these things, you're going to have to do that, because you don't, unless you're going to hire all these new people and have all these people on staff to build this yourself. If you want to do it in that way, which is the ultimate goal, I think, for a lot of these things that we would want to do, you may have to go to the cloud to get that kind of service.
Sean, let's stick with you for the next question. So, one of the ways that traditional storage refreshes used to work is you basically had to kind of guess how much storage, compute, networking that you were going to need in the future, and make some assumptions and buy that, and then just kind of hope that fit, and then try to adjust on the way in the event that that's not ended up how that worked. And what we're seeing now is that the expectation is really more of like, you have to be prepared for all of the different ways that your business can evolve. How are you seeing that play out with your customers? And, some of the technologies we've been talking about around hybrid, like Greenlake, how does that help kind of support these types of endeavors as opposed to the more traditional routes we discussed?
So I do think that, there probably is more of that than there has been in the past, but I don't think it wasn't there in the past either. I think we always kind of were looking at, there's several ways to do this. I mean, that's our job. That's our business again. Like, there's always like 10 different ways to do it, and everybody's got the best way, or they think they've got the best way. And then you're trying to figure out which one works for you. So I do think that that has always existed, but maybe there's more options now. We have, this is another thing why I wouldn't necessarily be jumping into like locking into a single provider, a cloud or otherwise, just because, there may be things, a cloud provider does not, again, it's not magic. It's like they have to develop and create standards that their customers will have to embrace to be able to, utilize their service. And just like you did when you created your own internal standards for your company and you made decisions on what you think was right or not, when you go to the cloud, you're going to have to do some of those same things. You may have to make compromises. You may have to do things that you didn't want to do, but in order to make it fit, you're going to have to do that. Or you're going to have to say, hey, I'm not doing that in the cloud. I'm going to do this on premise. I already have a solution for that. We've done a lot of work on it, and we like the way it works, and we'll do that here. And then there's some things I like in the cloud, and maybe that we can leverage. So I do feel like that gives you more choices. I mean, there are things that you can do that you couldn't do before, just because of the economics. You can't do everything, and that is another area where I think there's a little bit of a kind of an unrealistic idea of, there's this feeling, I think, that everyone thinks this cloud is unlimited. Because like when this pandemic hits, everybody's like, well, we don't. I guess we can't expand anymore. I guess we'll just go to the cloud. The cloud has this unlimited, like, they have workers and they stuff just pouring in even when no one else can get it. But I don't think that they can get stuff when, maybe they have a little more buying power than the average company, but in a situation like we're in now, they're not going to be able to get equipment just like anyone else. The thing that they are is they're over provisioned. They got tons of capacity because their plan is for huge growth. And I have no doubt that cloud will continue to grow and be embraced in lots of different ways and get more mature over time. But I do think that it, it's not the panacea. There's no way that you're going to be able to get everything you want. So you have to figure out, again, like, be intelligent with your choices and figure out what makes the most sense. Don't buy into I have to do all this, because if you're thinking it's cheaper, I think a lot of times people find out it's not. And I really compare that to the traditional space that we're in now. If I have a customer that's using, I don't know, whatever, pick a brand of server or storage, and then I'm going up to another, I have another manufacturer that wants to get into that customer, they want that customer, they're willing to like pretty much give their stuff away to get that customer because they don't have that customer. They don't have that customer, so they want to get in there, so they'll give their stuff away, but they're not going to give it away forever, and that's where we are with cloud right now. They're trying to get every customer. So it looks, even though it might look attractive now, I think a lot of the real cost won't be figured out till later. They'll get us once they have enough customers and you're locked into there, then they'll start to really right size from a costing standpoint. And you'll start to realize, this isn't a cost that's ever going to go down either. It's probably always going to go up and never go away. So, right. Take what you want from that.
Yeah. George, what are your thoughts? Do you see, how are the conversations? Like, what are the changing expectations that you're seeing out of customers, and specifically, why are they looking at Greenlake to kind of meet that? I think you are on mute, George.
Yeah, just to echo what Sean just said, I think that there's definitely risks, right, in the cloud. And again, I want to make sure that I reiterate several times that cloud is not a bad thing. We don't see it as a bad word. We know this is where this is going, but we also identify that there are several types of cloud, right? It's not just public cloud, right? It's public cloud versus private cloud versus some mesh of in between. And so, when we look about where things are going and how we've considered things in the past and how we're looking at things in the future, I think Sean's correct. I think we've always looked at things from how many different ways can we approach the problem? How many different ways can we solve the problem? And I think cloud actually benefits us there, right? Again, if we look at from a workload perspective, hybrid makes a lot of sense, but I'm talking about hybrid cloud. I'm not talking about on-prem anything. So I think a lot of times when people start thinking about hybrid, they're, you still want me to have storage and servers on site? Well, yes, maybe, but that storage and servers on site are managed like a cloud. They're not managed by you, right? They're managed by a third party, whether that be HP or somebody else. That is a different way to approach it. That's the same benefit you get from public cloud you can get from private, right? And this is what we're talking about when we talk about a hybrid model. And the way that I see this playing out, especially from a Greenlake perspective, we're seeing a lot of our larger customers embrace this model, just because they've found out the hard way, where they kind of jumped in both feet. Hey, let's go 100% cloud. And I don't think that's a bad outlook, right? I don't think that's a bad way when cloud first became popular, especially for smaller shops out there. I think 100% cloud made a lot of sense to them. But I think they quickly realized, kind of like what Sean was elaborating around, there's some cost to the business when we jump in with both feet. There's kind of a Hotel California type vibe when you get into a cloud, right? You can't ever leave. If I ever need to pull a high transactional database that's got a large amount of data behind it out of public cloud down to private cloud for some performance reason, or maybe it's some other reason, maybe it's a security or a governance issue, that's very costly to the business. And there's no real easy way to do that. And so when we start to talk about things like Greenlake with HPE, we can make those things easy. One of the things around one of the questions later references Nimble, and we have a new Electra line that's an on-prem array. However, it can be cloud managed and it can be cloud addressable. So we have something called HPE Cloud Volumes, and so that eliminates some of the back and forth between public cloud and private cloud when I'm moving data. And so there's several ways to approach getting to the cloud, right, or getting the workloads that need to be in the cloud to the cloud, and making sure that I don't make a mistake, right, by stepping outside of bounds and putting a workload up there that I'm going to have to snatch back at some point in time. And so I think from that perspective, we've always looked at multiple ways to approach a problem, and cloud is actually emboldening us there around how do we do that faster? How do we do it with less back and forth between departments and test and dev people versus IT admins versus application managers versus CIOs, right? I think cloud can eliminate that. But again, it is more of a hybrid approach. You're still going to have, I mean, let's face it, in some businesses, there's governance rules and policies that say you can't have your data outside of your control. And so that eliminates public cloud for that specific workload. And so again, I'm kind of going all over the map here, but the question's more around how do we approach problems. And I think that cloud is actually enabling that. And hybrid cloud allows us to enable that with very little risk to the business.
All right. Let's go on to our next question. So let's talk about existing HPE customers, because I think there's going to be a lot of folks on there. Again, kind of the standard model is, after 3 years, you basically just kind of upgrade to whatever the newest model is. Maybe you kind of, price things based on your need. Again, Sean, let's talk about how that changes. So if you have a 3-year-old Nimble array, for example, how do you decide whether or not just to upgrade to the newest model, as opposed to looking at some of the other offerings from HPE, looking at something like GHCI, for example?
Okay, so first, I don't want to seem like I agree with George that there's definitely I embrace technology, and really with the key thing is when it makes sense. So there's a lot of, again, there's so much stuff out there, and I, really what I like to, my message I'm trying to get across is that, get beyond the hype and really understand what you're trying to accomplish, and select the right thing that makes sense for whatever your business is. So cloud is definitely, it's another lever that you can pull. Now around the way this, I mean, this is something I really would like to see some kind of an uprising against, not necessarily focused on hardware, but just in general, the concept of, even if you look back at open source, I was like, open source, when it first started taking off, there was this idea, it's free, it's free. Hey, we can, and it's really good. It's close enough, and I don't have to pay for it. But if the most of the real successes in open source turned into a subscription support model, like Red Hat, for example, and it wasn't, if you really wanted to use it in a commercial space, you ended up paying for a support renewal on a regular basis. And then I was like, well, when you started to look at the cost, it was like, it's not really any different or any less than it was before, very similar. And I kind of feel that it was almost better before, when you had the option. Now, I don't think that this is not an option, and you can still buy hardware like this, but software, really, this is going away, which is the idea of, like, let's take Microsoft Office, for example. Like, I bought it for years and years. And, I don't really know. The same version of Word I bought like 20 years ago, it probably worked just as well for me today, because I don't use anything fancy. I use spell check and, boldface, underline, a few things. I'm not a big Word person. But every year there's a new version of Word, or every other couple of years and everything. And there was always these upgrades, and you're like, sometimes you're like, I don't even want to upgrade because I really know how to use it now. And most of the time it was a big change to the interface. And you're like, I got to relearn everything. And you're just like, and there's nothing here that I'm going to use. There's no new features or anything. And you're like, but you have the option to not upgrade. You're like, I'm going to pass on this one. And then maybe the next one too. And then, it's kind of like your phone today. When you buy your phone, you're like, the next phone comes out, you're like, there's not enough changes. My phone works fine. I don't want to have to mess with it. I'll just wait for the big changes. And I think that the way we've gone, with software and the subscription model and everything, it's like, you don't have a choice anymore. You will pay this monthly or whatever this is perpetually. Or if you decide to stop using it, you can't use it anymore. You're done. You don't own it, so it's gone. And the problem I have with that is that it's everyone's doing it. Every single manufacturer, every software product, everyone's going to this model. And how many recurring bills do you want? It's like it's a little bit scary to me. I kind of like the way we had an option before. And again, there's good reasons to do, like when Adobe came out with their subscription model, a lot of people complained about it. But I always thought that was for them, that, that was actually not a bad model for them, because Adobe used to say, they used to have to come out with some statistics a long time ago saying that there's this massive amount of piracy for Photoshop. And there may, I don't know where they got their data, but there may have been. But I was like, the thing is, they're automatically saying we just lost, billions of dollars because all this Photoshop got pirated. And I was like, not really, because, if you were able to protect that in a way that no one could copy it, it wouldn't be that all these would turn into buyers. Like all these people that were pirating it, now they're going to buy Photoshop. People that buy Photoshop for sure are making a living off it. It's like it's worth it to them, and so that's why I think that this model of there are good reasons now. If you need to use Photoshop but you're not going to make a living off of it, but you want to use it for a project, it might make more sense for you to do a subscription thing where you can use it for the project, and when you're done, you're done. So there are good reasons to have subscriptions, but I think right now I feel like it's overboard, like everything, and nobody wants to go away from it. It's like taxes, hey, we got you, we're never going to let you go, So I kind of like the ability to kind of decide whether or not and there are companies that do that today. There are companies that have a lot of the hardware companies, of course, but then there are still some software companies that are giving you the option to buy a perpetual license or do I like that. I like choices. I mean, make it so that the customer can decide if it's worth it or not. Like if they think, hey, for me, it makes sense. I don't mind doing a subscription, then that's great. They have that option. For the other one that doesn't, they have that other option. I don't like trying to push some people into something that maybe isn't a good fit for them.
Great. Let's go on to the next question. So looking ahead at Greenlake then, George, out of the kind of existing customers for HPE that are currently utilizing it, who in your opinion should be the ones that are most likely to be benefiting from looking at Greenlake?
Sure. So, I think that's kind of a wide question when it comes to customer focus. I think any customer can benefit from Greenlake. However, what we're seeing right now, kind of trending, is more of the enterprise space, the larger customers, right? That complex workloads, right? That require that, let's say 30% of their stuff is going to public cloud. The rest, they're trying to keep on-prem for governance or security or policy or performance reasons. So what we're seeing is large enterprises really adopt this hybrid model. And what Greenlake really is it's a consumption model, right? It's cloud based off of traditional cloud, but you can have on-prem private cloud as well, and it's managed by one single pane of glass. And so from that perspective, we're seeing a lot of large enterprises that, especially like in the verticals of oil and gas, a lot of medical verticals, right? So they're trying to keep control of certain types of HIPAA data, or they're trying to, they've got governance and policies around certain type of, medical data. We're seeing that in manufacturing as well, where we've got, a lot of edge data that is actually out at these manufacturing remote sites. That they don't have the infrastructure, right? Or they may be in a location that doesn't warrant or have access to good WAN connectivity. And so they're forced to kind of take that hybrid approach and put infrastructure that is still cloud-like, right, in nature, but they're putting it out at remote sites and gathering that data at remote sites, and then they're processing that data at remote sites, whereas they don't have that option to do that in public cloud. And so from a Greenlake perspective, there's a lot of goodness there, especially around, we can get rid of things like management tasks, right? I mean, it truly is cloud in a data center on-prem, but it's not, it doesn't have to be managed by you. It can absolutely be that, hey, I want to swipe a credit card and get a new server resource. Hey, I want to push a button and get 10 terabytes of storage, right, dedicated to this database workload. It can be that. And depending on what your what outcomes you're looking for, you can choose the services that you apply to Greenlake, right? So from fully managed to bits and pieces. And so again, going back to what I really like what Sean said is, we want to provide customers with choice. The world is absolutely going this subscription as a service model, and so is HPE. However, HPE is committed to giving our customers choice, and it goes back to just that whole hybrid strategy around. We understand that there's not a silver bullet. There never has been, and there never will be, for all IT problems.
We may have lost George temporarily. Sean, let's go to you for our next question, our final one before we go to the questions from the audience. And so, kind of capping off the discussion about Greenlake, why would customers want to look at Greenlake instead of just going with one of the major cloud providers like Amazon or Google or Azure directly?
Well, I think George kind of covers some of those reasons in his response, but like another one for me would be, like I mentioned earlier in this present session, that a lot of the customers, I have a lot of customers that do understand or have a really good understanding of what they want to accomplish, and they've done a lot of the work already. Like for them, they don't need expertise from a cloud provider, and really it creates basically more work, because if they've already done all this work understanding, and of course no one knows their business better than they do. So like if you go to someplace else, there's always been it's always one of the bigger challenges with IT is, the business IT connection. How do I solve a business problem with an IT solution when we're talking different languages? Like there's got to be this translator in between, the guy that understands like what's the business objective, and the guy that understands the technology to say, how do we make this technology fit the business objective? And now so if you're doing Greenlake, you're just leveraging. One of the things with Greenlake is that it's gonna get broader and broader over time. But like George said, mostly it's larger customers today. And it's also growth customers. For the most part, people that are looking at Greenlake are customers that have a projection, a fairly good growth projection, because, one of the values there is that if you were investing yourself, you'd have to buy all this up front. But like Greenlake gives you the potential to invest in a footprint that fits today with a migration to, or expand, like cloud, to be able to be flexible and expand over time, and everything, the gear is already on site. It's like it's just turning on. So it gives you that cloud-like ability to kind of expand your resources, but not all the upfront cost of having to buy it, right away. So there's a variety of reasons, why Greenlake makes sense. Security and all those other things, and performance can be a reason. That all those things that George covered, and then of course the ability to have kind of like a little bit of a cloud-like experience as far as being able to expand rapidly or from a hardware perspective without totally adopting one of these. Like I said, these if you truly were going to use any fully utilize a cloud provider today, you're really looking at embracing their stack, the way they do things. I mean, they have these cloud providers, they'll have things like VMware Cloud Foundation or something like that. VMware Cloud Foundation is you're just taking VMware and putting it somewhere else, and that's another reason, again, by the way, to leverage cloud. Like if you don't have the facilities or place and you want a DR site or something, it may be more cost effective to leverage, they've obviously spent tons of money on these different data centers. They're all over the place, and that may be a good reason to leverage it, for a offsite or a DR site. But it's, the reasons why Greenlake makes sense is just that it's not, you're not buying into that whole stack. You're taking advantage of the fact that you have knowledge of what you're trying to accomplish, and you just don't want to take that all on yourself all up front. You have that ability to do that in a more dynamic way.
Yeah, great. Let's go ahead and take some questions from the audience. We're moving right along. Jeremy M wants to know, isn't it true that pulling out of any technology is difficult, not just cloud, but moving from Dell to HPE or other? The idea, once you have your infrastructure and trained personnel, et cetera, it's hard to move. The true cost is so much more than just hardware. Sean, we'll start with you. Let's see if George may or may not be back. But Sean, let's start with you. Go for it.
There's totally truth in that statement, right? Of course, anytime you change technologies. Now, I would say that I don't like the fact that we've gotten into this commodity view of everything, and being in the industry for so long, I can really appreciate great technology, and I hate to it seems like we're always pushing for the lowest common denominator. Hey, let's just make something that all works. Well, usually the best things are not. They're unique, and they add some kind of value proposition that's not common, right? And so, but that means that it's also unique in the skill set that it takes to use it and develop it and to work with it. So that's a compromise. You have to make yourself. You have to decide, and that's why I was saying moving into the cloud, it's not one compromise. It's everything. I mean, you're completely buying into their ecosystem, and there's nothing left. That you can't. It's a big. You have to be all in. To do that. And I personally am not. Knowing how fast technology changes. I mean, I can tell you so many products in my career that have. I mean, just, think about things like Lotus 123 or WordPerfect or Hayes modems, you can go on and on and on, but all these products at one time, Novell, at one time, these products had 90% or greater market share, and they're gone today. So I like to be flexible, and I like to pick things that make sense for the time that you're in, the time, and leverage this. But I'm not so keen on going all in. I just feel like there will be, he mentioned servers, but servers are fairly, and virtualization has made this fairly, portable. Applications in virtualization can move from one platform to another relatively easy, and they have become more commoditized by far than they were a few years ago. And but at the same time, I will say that it does make a difference what you choose, even in the platform, because I was at VMworld years ago, and I remember them getting up there and saying, who cares what platform you're using, because you're going to stick our hypervisor on it, and nobody cares anymore because it's all abstracted from the user, which is true. And I would contend, at least in large enterprises for several years now, my customers don't know. I used to talk to the actual guy that was the application owner when I was working with, deploying a solution. Usually that guy was there when I was, we showed up on site to provide whatever gear or whatever they needed. That guy that was owning the application, or maybe multiple, the team was there. We were talking to them. We were explaining stuff. That's no longer, and it hasn't been for a while. Usually, if you're talking maybe smaller business, that may be true, but in the larger enterprises, especially any customer that has data centers and stuff, I don't show up at the data center and see the application owner almost ever. They're never there. It's operational staff to get the stuff rack stacked and IP'd. And then we call the application owner and say, hey, it's up. The application owner never saw it, never physically looked at it. They're just accessing it remotely. But the bottom line is so does it matter anymore? If the service, I would say it does matter, because even if everything was completely abstracted and you didn't know what it was in the back end and everything, let's say we get to a cloud-only world where there's nobody buying anything anymore. You're renting everything as a service. Well, there's a cost to that service, and who's ever doing the best job with the back end, from a performance, from a manageability, from whoever's doing the best job of that is going to have an advantage over everybody else, not just for them, but for you as a customer. So I think even though you don't see it anymore, it doesn't mean it doesn't matter. It still matters. It's just unfortunately, to a lot of people it does. In their mind, it doesn't. So it's been extracted so far that it doesn't. And you could even say that. Funny thing is, you could say that about VMware today, who was saying it about hardware not that long ago. Containers and other threats to VMware makes. Why does it? What difference does it make? Hypervisor, especially if I take it away from you. Because today I have a lot of customers that would never move away from VMware because they feel like VMware still has significant, and there's a lot of good things about VMware, and they'd say it's just a much better hypervisor than any other. But if they weren't doing it, they're not managing it anymore. And I can host your workloads on Hyper-V or KVM or what other hypervisor, and it's abstracted from you, and you're just paying for a service. Why are you going to use VMware anymore? Are they going to use, is your provider going to use VMware? They may decide not to. They may decide they get a better cost, using something else. So, there are, what comes around goes around. It's a crazy world today.
Hey, George, can you hear us?
Yep, sure can.
All right, great. Welcome back. Let's go to you next for our next question. TFMJ1968 wants to know, so how is this helping me determine what I want to do for my storage upgrade that I need?
Yeah, so I would say it's a great question. I would say that the approach is different, right? So from a conversation perspective, and used to storage conversations were pretty straightforward, right? It was how much capacity, what's your growth like, what's the IO, what are the workloads, and that's kind of how the conversations went. Now the conversations are more in line with what's the business outcome I'm looking for, right? What's the cost of doing business? Where can I actually host this workload? We start to take a closer look at how the workloads actually perform, what performance is needed for that workload, instead of just from a global storage perspective. So instead of just looking at your data as a whole, we're breaking down your data into silos, into verticals, and the conversations are just getting a little more complex because some of that data may need to reside in the cloud. It may make more sense for the business to have it reside in the cloud. However, I guarantee you there's a good percentage of that data that still needs to reside in a performant type environment. And so we just need to identify those workloads and proceed accordingly. And so, using partners like Mobius are a big deal to us, right? Because they've done this for a while. And they're taking kind of the same approach that we are, this hybrid approach. They know that not everything belongs in one silo or another, right? There is no silver bullet, like I said earlier. And so the conversation just needs to happen, right? Just from a storage perspective, it's not like we can tell you, hey, go buy this storage array right now. It's more around, hey, let's get together, let's sit down, let's have an in-depth conversation around workloads. Let's have an in-depth conversation around what your business is trying to achieve, where they're trying to make their money, right? What tasks are being pushed down from the C-level, the C-suites, and then proceed with the conversation from there, and then truly identify, right, a solution instead of a box. And that's really where the conversation needs to go. And it's not like we've never sold solutions before. We've always done it that way. I think it was just more from a generalistic approach before, where we were just saying, hey, cloud really wasn't an option, right? 2, 3, 5 years ago. It was this on-prem storage. So the conversation was a lot more simpler. We were going to give you, the capacity, the IO, the performance you needed. And then from there, we kind of took the next steps. And now the conversation needs to happen around the applications first, right? The outcomes first. And then we kind of backwards engineer it into, hey, I can put 50% of this in the cloud, in public cloud. However, I've got a small portion at the edge that needs to remain just traditional on-prem, and then I've got maybe 40%, 30% that can be in private cloud, or some hybrid version of that. Maybe it belongs with a lower tier MSP cloud provider, right, instead of one of the big three. And so it just it's just a more complex conversation that needs to happen. So in order to help you, right, we would love to do it. We just want to have those conversations. We don't want to just, hey, here's our portfolio, right? Which silo do you fit in? And so from that perspective, I think we can help a lot, just because all of our people are coming up to speed or have come to speed on this new process of around we really have to have that workload, that performance conversation first, and then backwards engineer from there.
All right, great. Well, gentlemen, we are about out of time. I did want to give you one last opportunity to share just basically any recap and really how you recommend folks get started in this now. George, we'll start off with you. What parting advice do you have for our audience today?
Sure. I would just make sure that you're taking a holistic approach, right? I mean, I know some of you are probably, 90% cloud, 80% cloud. Some may be at 20% cloud, 10% cloud, right? You're in different situations. And I would encourage you to engage our partners like Mobius, right? I would encourage you to engage, your HP resources. Those guys will help you, right? And we're very patient people. We kind of have to be, especially in this world. And we have to have those meaningful conversations. And I think that's been missing maybe in the past, where this transition from traditional on-prem to hybrid. I think woke a lot of people up. I think a lot of people are kind of starting to understand and feel the need, especially from business pressures from top down, to where we have to be more mobile, we have to be more agile, we have to understand that storage and compute are not going to fit into a bubble. They're going to be kind of all over the map. And so, I would just encourage you to strike up a conversation, right? To ask questions, even if they're hard questions. And we like those questions. We like hard questions. We like questions that challenge us, because there's absolutely a solution out there. And again, we're talking about solutions. We don't want to, quote unquote, sell you a box. That's not the purpose here. The purpose is to get you in the right solution, to make sure that, we're giving you 1, job security, 2, the best business outcome, and then 3, right? I mean, this is kind of a quirky term, but best bang for your buck, right? I mean, that's where it has to be. Especially in this day and age of COVID, right? It's not like companies are are spending money like crazy, right? They're going to spend money very targeted, and they're going to be very strategic in their approach to everything going forward. So I think that's the best place to start, is a good old conversation.
Great. And Sean, any final words of wisdom from you?
My message is just kind of the same as it has been through the session, which is really just do your due diligence. I love technology, and I'm all about utilizing technology when it makes sense. Like there are things where I'll be like, that's cool, but it doesn't really make sense. And that's what I would encourage customers to do. I mean, as a company, Mobius, we come from a traditional background, and we're moving more and more resources and working more and more with cloud as our customers are looking at it. And part of our work is around helping customers identify those things that make sense for them, and trying to make it the best transition possible when they decide to do that. And so, I don't want to discourage it. I just want to encourage customers to ask questions, and as many as you can, and really try to understand how whoever you choose to whether it's cloud or on premises or something else, that you just understand that how it's going to solve your problem, and because that's our goal really, is to try to make our customers successful, and it's a tremendous amount of satisfaction. It's why I do this job. I mean, I really like helping people achieve the outcome that they want, and I hope that that if you guys are looking at Mobius, you'll consider us.
All right, and there you have it. It's now time to announce the winner of our prize. Thanks to everyone for staying with us and hanging out and asking all those great questions. The winner of our PowerBeats High Performance Wireless Earbuds is going to go to Clint319. Congratulations, Clint319. You are the winner of our prize for today. Please send David S. a private message in the community. Let him know where you would like that shipped. And please thanks for hanging out with us. Big thank you again to George and to Sean, as well as to HPE and Mobius for sponsoring today's event. Everyone, hope everyone had a great time learning as much as I did. I hope you guys will join us for another future event just like what you saw today. If you're interested, please make sure to stick around until after the presentation ends. But until next time, everyone, please stay safe, keep it spicy, and we will see you guys back here next time. So long, everybody. Thanks.